I'm 83 years old, and I need to tell you something that might sting a little. I'm saying it gently, but I'm not going to soften it. I spent too many years softening things and calling it kindness. I taught people how to disrespect me, not because I deserved it, not because I was weak, but because I kept doing little things, almost polite things, that told people my boundaries were negotiable. And some people, especially the ones closest to you, will negotiate you right out of your dignity if you let them. And look, I know what you're thinking. Laura Grace, I can't control how other people behave. You're right, you can't. I couldn't make Vincent do anything. I couldn't make my children treat me with tenderness. I couldn't make the staff at Meadowbrook see me as a full person. I couldn't make the world respect old women. But I could stop inviting disrespect into my own life. I could stop participating in it. And that changed everything. I need you to understand something before I continue. I'm not here to make you feel good for 10 minutes and then send you back into your life unchanged. I'm not going to tell you to stand in front of a mirror and chant that you're a queen. I'm not against encouragement. I'm against pretending. What I'm going to tell you came out of my own humiliation. It came out of being talked down to by people I raised. It came out of being treated like I was already half gone. It came out of one night in my kitchen when I realized I'd been begging for respect in ways that guaranteed I wouldn't get it. There are 5 things I learned, and I'm saving the most painful one for the end, because it's the one that finally forced me to look at myself without excuses. The first thing is this: I stopped giving detailed explanations for my decisions. Let me explain. When I was younger, I believed explaining was mature. I believed if I just gave enough reasons, enough context, enough justification, people would understand me, and then they'd respect me. Honestly, that was a fantasy. Here's what it actually did. Every time David or Linda questioned me about my house, my driving, my money, my doctor appointments, I would launch into a speech like I was in court. I'd say, well, I talked to the pharmacist, and I checked the weather, and I only drove during daylight, and I'm being careful, and on and on. And what I didn't understand back then was that my explaining wasn't proving I was competent. It was proving I believed I needed their approval. Pay attention to this detail because it's going to matter later. My explanations never ended the conversation. They extended it. They gave my children more material to argue with. Linda would say, "But Mom, that's not the point." David would say, "You're missing what we're saying." And the more I explained, the more I sounded like a child pleading a case. One afternoon, after Vincent had been gone a few years, David came over with that tight smile he gets when he's bracing for conflict. He looked around my living room like he was inspecting a rental property. He said, "Mom, why is there a rug here?" I said, "Because I like it. It was from—" He cut me off. "It's a tripping hazard." And I started to explain. I started to say, "I'm careful. I always lift my feet. I don't rush. I've had that rug for years." I was halfway into my usual speech when I heard myself. I stopped mid-sentence. I swallowed. My heart was going fast. I said, "Because I decided to." David blinked like I'd spoken another language. He said, "What?" I said because I decided to. Then I said nothing. You know what surprised me the most? The room changed. Not magically, not like he suddenly adored my rug, but the dynamic shifted. He couldn't argue with a courtroom brief anymore because I wasn't offering one. He had to face the fact that he was speaking to an adult. That was the first time in years I felt my own authority return. The second thing is this: I got comfortable with silence. Not sulking silence, not I'm furious and I'm going to punish you silence. I mean real silence, the kind where I don't scramble to fix the discomfort. When someone says something disrespectful, especially a family member, there's a reflex to rush in and smooth it over, to keep the peace, to laugh, to explain, to apologize for your own existence. I used to do that. I used to fill the air like my life depended on it. Then came the fall. I've told you about it before, but I'm going to tell you the part that most people skip. I fell and I couldn't get up, and I was on the floor for 11 hours. I could hear my phone ring across the room, and I couldn't reach it. I peed on myself. I got cold. Then I got hot. Then I felt empty. I wanted to give up. And when my children found out, they didn't just worry, they panicked. And panic can turn into control fast. They stood around my hospital bed and talked about me like I was asleep. They said, she can't be alone. They said, this is unsafe. They said, we have to do something. I said, I'm right here. And David said, Mom, don't start. That sentence, don't start. Like I was a nuisance, like my opinion was a tantrum. In the past, I would have reacted. I would have argued. I would have cried. I would have begged them to see me. Instead, I went quiet. I looked at David. I let the silence sit there. I let it stretch. I didn't glare. I didn't smirk. I just let him feel what he'd said. He shifted his weight. Linda looked away. Emma started fussing with her purse strap. Michael cleared his throat. And that's when I saw it. They were counting on me to react so they could label me emotional and move on. The silence took that away. Silence isn't passive. Silence is a choice. Silence says, I heard you, and I'm not going to dance for you. The third thing, and this is the one that sounds extreme until you've lived long enough, is that I had to be willing to lose the relationship. Not every relationship, not at the first disagreement, but I had to be willing to lose access, lose approval, lose the illusion of closeness if the price was my dignity. Because if I wasn't willing to lose anything, I'd accept everything. This is where the story gets heavy. When my children pushed Meadowbrook, they used love as a lever. They said it was for my safety. They said it was temporary. They said, if you loved us, you'd do this. I felt like a burden. I felt trapped. I went for 30 days. And I want you to know something. I didn't walk into Meadowbrook as a heroic rebel. I walked in as a scared old woman trying not to look scared. The first week, I cooperated. I smiled. I said thank you. I didn't want anyone to think I was difficult. I didn't want my kids to hear I was non-compliant. I wanted to prove I was a good patient. That's what they call you there, a patient, not Laura. Pay attention to this detail because it's going to matter later. I realized I was performing for approval the same way I'd been performing for my children. Different building, same pattern. Then one evening, I pressed the call button because I needed help getting to the bathroom. Nobody came. I waited. I pressed again. I waited. Wait, it gets worse. I tried to stand on my own because I didn't want to wet myself. My legs shook. I grabbed the edge of the bed. I made it halfway, and then I had to sit back down, hard. I felt my eyes fill. I wasn't lonely. I was powerless. And that was my line. I decided I would rather fight my own children than disappear in a place like that before I had to. I decided I would rather have them angry at me than have them slowly forget who I was. So I became willing to lose something, their approval, their comfort, the version of me that made their lives easier. That willingness is what got me out. The fourth thing is this. I stopped trying to change how people felt about me and started paying attention to what I would and wouldn't accept. Let me explain. For years, I wanted my children to understand me. I wanted them to see that I was still capable, still sharp, still allowed to want my own life. I thought if I could just find the right words, they'd relax. But here's the thing. Other people's feelings aren't a door I can unlock from the outside. So I changed the focus. I stopped trying to convince them. I started setting consequences. When Linda would speak to me like I was a teenager, I stopped arguing. I said, I'm going to hang up now. We can talk when we can talk respectfully. Then I did it. No speech, no apology. Click. The first time, my hands shook. I was afraid I'd made it worse. I was afraid she'd never call again. She called back the next day, calmer. When David would bring up Meadowbrook again, I stopped making my case. I said, I'm not discussing facilities today. Then I changed the subject. If he pushed, I ended the visit. I walked him to the door. And look, that didn't make him thrilled, but it made him adjust. Because I wasn't begging anymore. I was deciding. I didn't know it at the time, but every small boundary was me rebuilding my dignity brick by brick. The fifth thing is the one nobody wants to hear, and I didn't want to hear it either. I had to examine whether I actually respected myself. Because if I didn't respect myself, why would anyone else? This is the part where I have to confess something I'm not proud of. For years, I trained my children to think my emotions were their job. I'd call when I was anxious. I'd call when I was bored. I'd call when I wanted reassurance. And when they didn't answer, I'd spiral, and then I'd call again. Honestly, I cringe remembering it. And what I didn't understand back then was that I was teaching them to see me as needy. I was teaching them that my peace depended on their immediate response. I was handing them power over my mood. That's not connection. That's dependency. And once you become dependent, people start treating you like you're less than, sometimes without even meaning to. So I made myself change, not because I wanted to be tough, because I wanted to be respected. I built routines. I built a life in my home that didn't require constant rescue. I made safety plans. I practiced living like I deserved my own attention. After my fall, I started writing these things down, small rules, small scripts, reminders to myself like, don't explain, use silence, end the call. You're allowed to say no. I wrote them in a notebook because I needed them when I was scared. I didn't plan on sharing them. I didn't know it at the time, but Claire found that notebook and said, Grandma, other women need this. She helped me put it online. She called it The Ultimate Guide to Freedom. I still feel strange about it, honestly. But I'm telling you now because it's part of how I learned to respect myself again. And now I'm going to bring you back to the beginning because I promised you the heaviest part at the end. The heaviest part is this. Sometimes the people who disrespect you will never admit they did it. They'll call it help. They'll call it love. They'll call it being realistic. And if you keep waiting for them to validate your feelings before you set your boundary, you'll wait forever. I'm not saying cut off your family. I'm saying stop volunteering for disrespect. Because I'm 83 and I can tell you with calm certainty, the longer you tolerate it, the more it becomes normal and the harder it is to undo. So here's what I want you to do today. Pick one place where you've been over-explaining, one place where you've been rushing to fill silence, one place where you've been accepting treatment that makes you feel small, and try one new response, just one. Because I decided. Silence. Leaving the room. ending the call. Not with drama, with dignity. Now I'm going to be direct with you, because I don't know how long I'll keep being brave about this. David called me again this week and said, "Mom, you need to take that book down. It's embarrassing the family. You're airing private business." And I almost did. I sat here at my table and I stared at the wood grain and I thought, maybe I should just stop. Maybe I should make it easy on them. But then I thought about the women who wrote to me saying, "My kids are trying to place me," or "I didn't know I could say no," or "I've been disrespected for years and I thought it was my fault." And I kept it up. The link to the ultimate guide to freedom is in the pinned comment. I might take it down soon because I'm losing my nerve and because my son keeps pressing me. So if something I said today reached you, click it now. Don't wait. And if you want to stand with me, leave a like. It tells me to keep talking, even when my own family would prefer I didn't. I read every comment you leave, every single one. If you've been disrespected and you're trying to find your spine again, tell me. I'm here. Subscribe if you want to keep talking. Every week I sit down at this table and I tell you the truth. Because someone has to. Because we deserve respect at every age, especially this one.